We are here today to talk about DVCon. The upcoming conference will be March 2nd through 5th at the Doubletree Inn in San Jose. It's the 27th year for this very important conference that highlights not only design, but verification. My guests today include Yatin Trivedi and Ambar Sarkar. So Yatin Trivedi, please tell me what you are doing this year with respect to DVCon.
So this year I'm going to serve as the general chair.
Excellent. And Ambar, what are you doing with respect to the conference?
I'm the program chair, and my primary role is essentially we have a large technical program committee, and they essentially vet out the papers that the attendees will be looking at. This DVCon is unique in such a way because it's the conference for the practicing engineer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about DVCon going international before we get down to the specifics of the conference that will be happening here in March. What was the decision to go international? Where were you last year, and how do you rate the success of last year's efforts?
DVCon over the years had been growing significantly, and there was already a presence of international community at DVCon in San Jose. Given that those communities, particularly in Europe and India, that's where we decided to grow DVCon in 2014. The community itself was already large, and so the volunteers actually came up from that community and said, we would like to host it. Can we make it look and feel and the contents like the DVCon in San Jose? And so Martin Barnasconi from NXP led the DVCon Europe last year. And that was held in Munich in October. And in India, Umesh Sisodia, who used to run the Indian System C user group, he stepped up and grew the conference to beyond System C into a whole lot of design and verification topics. And obviously centered around XLS standards to turn that into a DVCon India.
Do you end up cannibalizing from the anchor tenant in the DVCon
Absolutely
franchise?
not. So DVCon, we take pride in the quality that we serve. The TPC does a very hard job of making sure quality papers go through. So one of the metrics for this was, okay, how many submissions will be there? And out of the submissions, how many quality papers will be there? Mm-hmm. We are able to actually do a almost pseudo but sort of scientific analysis, because what happened was the submissions did go down a little bit because some of the papers that were submitted didn't come. But the way we select the papers is we independently review the abstracts, create a score, and then pick the top quality papers that can be fit into our posters and regular oral sessions. Turned out that the lowest paper that went into oral sessions had a ranking higher than last year, even though there were more submissions.
Okay.
So that was extremely pleasant to us, and we are really looking forward to this year.
The exhibit hall is becoming a very important part of the conference.
So the exhibit has been actually an integral part for a very long time.
Okay.
The exhibit hours, and in fact the days, have increased over the last 5 or 6 years. In fact, last year we added Monday, the first day of the conference. Exhibits were added in there, generally known as the exhibit crawl or booth crawl. Altogether, about 9 hours of exhibit time was spread over 3 days. And it complements the technical program, because now what you hear from the presenters in papers or in posters, you get to see many of those products in the exhibit floor. It's really meant to be an industry networking event where you get to speak to people one-on-one, as opposed to somebody standing up on a podium and delivering a speech about how great the product is. That's not the intent. The intent is to have personal interactions, personal conversation.
So let's talk about the technical program.
Yeah, continuing on that thread, so there is this somebody standing on a podium and talking to people. Well, that's the oral presentation part.
Yes.
But in addition to that, and equally important are the poster sessions, which are papers that have been highly ranked, and for some reason we can only choose so many, so we had to sort of spread them around. And that's where you get the intimate feel. I've actually had a few presenters who come up to me and say that we really like this because they had this one-on-one interaction with an attendee right there. So in terms of technical overall, the way it makes sense to us, and I think people who are coming to DVCon will find that too, is that, we are really talking about, you might ask, well, what are the trends, etc. So if you think of it, you can think of this, that the papers and posters are essentially what the practicing engineer is doing today, what they're finding issues, what they're going to work on next, and you work amongst your peers. The tutorials are more forward-looking. What's coming new? Let's learn about them. And then the panels, which are also very technical in nature, are so take a step back. Let's look in the past, what has worked. Let's see how things are. Let's see where things are going. So it's a very cohesive approach to this whole conference, and it works very well. We integrate it with the exhibitors, and again, we sort of keep that almost that cozy networking feel to it. I mean, and that's why it's kind of such a pleasant thing to attend.
And to add to something Amber mentioned, tutorials are also split into 2 different days. Monday is what we refer to as Accelerator Day. These are primarily tutorials that are centered on the standards, right? And what are some of the things that are working with standards, the evolving methodologies, certain approaches for verification, etc. And then Thursday is really the industry tutorial day, where typically these are sponsored tutorials by the vendors, and vendors talking about specifically how their tools are supporting certain methodologies, supporting the standards, supporting certain solutions, and maybe even in terms of interoperability, how they are working together, right? So, those are the kind of opportunities for people to come to the conference to learn something, as a new skill, as opposed to papers and posters and panels. They are talking about what somebody has done.
And the panels this year will be what?
So one panel is labeled as art or science, and then the other panel is on System C. Will it always remain a niche player, or will it really have a much broader field to address as we go more into the system design?
So who will be keynoting?
RDGS.
Okay, perfect.
Needs no introduction.
Needs no introduction.
So Art's talk would be about all the smart gadgets that we are building. What are some of the challenges and how we are going to address that specifically from a design and verification standpoint as engineers.
Perfect. Yeah. In the category of bragging, can you tell me how many people were on your review committees and how many subheads were of the various committees?
So it's a very flat thing. So we have about 30 reviewers.
Okay.
And the way we do it is that they pick the papers that they want to do, and then we sort of massage it around. So everybody, so every paper gets vetted by at least 4 people when the submissions are done. And then once those are selected, then a reviewer, we call them a shepherd, and a co-reviewer work with them all the way through the presentation to make sure the papers have the utmost quality. One of the key selection criteria for us as a TPC is that can you take home and serve it? Mm-hmm. So every attendee, we look at every paper, each and every paper, and vet it out with this criterion. If I were attending and learned something, can I take it back and apply it into my day-to-day practice? Mm-hmm. And that has to pass that muster. Mm-hmm. And now we are in a networking event. We talk to the authors, we take their emails, we look at the papers, we read it up. So yeah, absolutely. This is like almost the source from which all the ideas we can take home and try out. So yeah.
And I can give you one example which is probably very straightforward.
Okay.
UVM.
Right.
Over the years, what has happened is when UVM working group or technical committee got started, right, there was the core group that understood the methodology for verification. Mm-hmm. We did the tutorial, the community expanded. Next year, we did advanced tutorial. Now, we are not doing the basic UVM tutorials because we believe that the community has already done that. But now we are doing more case studies of how people are using UVM and what are the benefits they are seeing. That's the unique thing about DVCon. The DVCon itself evolves with the topics and, in some sense, the requirements of the industry.
So I was interested to see that IP is being bragged on as a content topic at the upcoming DVCon. Tell me how that works. How is it you decided to embrace that, or are we just talking about verification IP?
Okay, so IP is an integral part of the whole design environment, design methodology, verification methodology. Many of the suppliers of EDA tools, for design and verification, are also suppliers of IP. And even when there are specific IP suppliers who don't have tools, they work very closely with the EDA vendors on interoperability to make sure that their IP works with the tools, and of course the EDA vendors work with IP suppliers to do the reverse. So that's in that sense, it's really the same community, or you can call it as an extended family, and therefore it's really important for the design and verification engineers to include most of their considerations that affect IP. So whether it's IP selection, IP integration, IP verification, all of those aspects of IP are part of the job for the design and verification engineers. I would say it's important that the designers and verification engineers today, right, look at IP as something that, in fact, what they are working on today will become an IP tomorrow, and therefore it's exactly the same set of issues.
So let's ask a little bit about Accelera and Accelera's role at DVCon.
I think there are two parts to it. One is Accelera is the sponsor of DVCon, right? Serving the community is really the central part of that. But the other side is Accelera is a standards development organization. Standards development is only a smaller piece. The larger piece is actually the adoption of the standard, the deployment of standard, the use of the standard. So when you look at Accelera's mission, right, making standards is really the smaller part. The larger part is bringing the whole community together so that the standards, the benefits of the standards are actually realized. Right? So that's why the Monday message is very important. Here are the standards. They are real. People are doing some things with it. And in fact, if you want, you can learn about the standards. Now, that's complementary to various training organizations and other ways of learning the actual practice. But about the standard itself, Accelera makes an effort to bring, and of course the tutorials are conducted by volunteers, right? I mean, there's, as you know, Accelera doesn't have staff. It's all by volunteers.
And the biggest endorsement of a standard are the papers and the posters and the panels where you see standards in practice. And that's how I think you're serving the standard, by actually talking about what are its strengths, what are its weaknesses, talk about it, come up with the next set of ideas that should go into the standards, and that you see happen live in these conferences.
Okay, one last question then. Is System C always going to be a niche player?
I would say
Looking
come
for
and
controversy here.
I would say come and find out at DVCon.
Oh, fine. Perfect. That was the right answer, by the way. As you can see, there's going to be a lot of fun and controversy at DVCon March 2nd to 5th, again at the Doubletree in San Jose. We hope that you all will come and join in the conversation and join in on the fun. I think, as usual, it's going to be fabulous, and every year, apparently, it gets better. I want to thank Yatin Trivedi and Amber Sarkar for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing all of you in March. Thank you.
Thank you.